Should you buy a home in Delaware? And the truth is, I don't know. But in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly how buying my home here in Delaware changed my life. And my hope is that some of the things I say may resonate with you. And after watching, you'll know whether or not you should buy a home here in Delaware. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Windom. I help people buy and sell homes here in Delaware. I've lived here my entire life, and on this channel I talk about what it's like living here in Delaware. And if you're potentially thinking about buying or selling a home here in Delaware, I love to have a conversation to see if it made sense for us to work together. So I'll put my info on screen now and again in the description below. Now, one of the most commonly asked questions that I get is, should I buy a house? And honestly, the answer is, I don't know. It's kind of a loaded question. There's so many factors that go into buying a house, and no two people are alike, so it's kind of hard to answer. But what I thought would help is if I told you exactly how buying a home here in Delaware changed my life, and hopefully some of the things you hear you can relate to or resonate with, and then you can make that decision on whether or not buying a home here in Delaware is right for you or not. So the first thing that buying a home changed for me in my life was kind of my focus and direction. So just a little background, I bought my house when I was 26, and at the time, I was working 3 jobs, and I was making, a decent amount of money to where as though I could pay my bills and I had some extra money in my pocket. So I was fine with that. I was reselling sneakers and just living at home. Now, I'm not sure what exactly flipped when I, decided to buy a house, but when I did, I got a real clear focus, and it kind of gave my life more so purpose and direction, because from then on in, everything just got really clear and I knew what I wanted to do and what I had to do. So it kind of gave me a goal to shoot for that I didn't have before, or I guess I just forgot. Once I started making that decision to, move forward and buy a house, I started, just kind of taking a look at myself and my life and, looking at things like credit, making a budget. It just kind of helped me grow up and kind of move on to that next phase of my life, where I think if I didn't decide to buy a house, I would have been stuck there. And after I bought the house, everything just kind of snowballed afterwards. Got married, and I look up a couple years later and I got 3 kids. I mean, what they say is true. I mean, life comes at you fast. Now, the next thing that changed my life after I bought my house was actually stability. So I don't know if this is maybe just a me thing, but I didn't grow up that wealthy. So as I moved around a lot, as I was growing up. So being able to have a home that you own and that you call your own, and knowing that as long as you pay the mortgage that you're going to be good, is just a feeling, just a huge boost to your, I guess, overall mental health. At least it was for me, and just your overall well-being. Just knowing that, hey, all I got to do is pay my bills and pay my mortgage, and I'm going to be fine. This is my house. And I've just heard so many horror stories of people who were, renting a property, and then all of a sudden the person who owned the property decided to sell it, and then they didn't have anywhere to go, or they couldn't find a house soon enough, and they didn't have another place to go. Or someone who's maybe living in an apartment complex or just a regular rental, they bumped the rent $200-$300 for market adjustments, and now they can no longer afford that place, and everyone else has kind of followed suit, and you don't have anywhere to live for the most part. And the next thing that kind of changed for me was that after I bought my house, I was able to build wealth. I guess the best way to illustrate this is kind of just with the numbers. But I will say, quick side note, is that when I did go to buy my house, I had so many people telling me like, oh yeah, the market's about to crash, you're crazy, you shouldn't buy. And honestly, I think that people are always going to say this no matter what. And I think they're going to keep saying it and keep saying it until every, once in a blue moon, they do get it right and the market crashes. But we all seen from '08 to now, that prices are going to rebound. I mean, It's just what happens. I mean, through the cycle of housing and everything else. And as a wise man once told me, is that they're not making any more land. So I'll take my chances with that. But back to what I was talking about when I actually started, just to illustrate the numbers. So I bought my house in 2016. And when I bought my house, I bought it for $240,000 and I got a 3.75 interest rate with, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and everything. That broke down to about $1,500 a month for my mortgage. And just to put it in perspective a bit, I could have rented the same type of house that I bought for around like $1,200 or so at that point in time. So I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit salty about the whole situation. I was like, man, I'm buying a house and I can just rent this same thing for less. But what I didn't know was that when you do buy a house, you kind of freeze the housing economy or housing market for yourself in that moment. What I mean by that is that usually, that mortgage payment that I'm paying, that $1,500, isn't going to really fluctuate too much unless there's, I guess, a huge increase in, your property taxes or your homeowner's insurance. So that $1,500, pretty much is going to stay the same for the life of that loan because everything is locked into place. Now, so as the rental market started to skyrocket over the next couple of years, and now, my mortgage payment is, still $1,500, but now that same house, if I wanted to, rent a house comparable to mine, it's probably going to be around somewhere around that $2,300, $2,500 mark. So just alone, just off my mortgage, I'm saving, $1,000 a month if I had decided to rent, because, going from place to place, I would eventually, rent would have got bumped or something. So whereas I've been paying, close to $2,500 a month to rent a house like the one I own. So that extra $1,000 that I'm saving, or I had saved over the years, I can put it in other, investment vehicles that I wouldn't have been able to if I had continued to rent instead of buy. Now, the other big thing that also happened during that time was appreciation. And just in those, couple of years from 2016 to now, my house has almost doubled in value. Now, I know this isn't typical because of the pandemic, but I would say it's safe to say, even in a regular market with, all the influx we're seeing from people wanting to move to Delaware, that my house would have appreciated anywhere from 20 to 30% from then until now. And, I bought the house at 220 and you're talking about, 20 to 30%. That's about, $70,000 in equity. And then on top of that, you put that I've been paying the house down all those years. I, potentially just added an additional $100,000 to my net worth from just living in a house that I wouldn't have been able to do if I was renting. Now, nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying this is one of the things that have drastically changed for me to make me be able to build wealth when I bought my house. And another thing that kind of changed my life was that it just opened it up to so much other possibilities. Now, when I bought my house, I was just a regular guy, looking, to purchase a house. And after I bought my house, I thought this was going to be some Herculean sized task, when in actuality, I was like, hey, this wasn't too bad. And I didn't really have anybody to ask about the situation because nobody in my, direct family had ever bought a house. So I was kind of going in blind. So I thought, this was just going to be a huge task that turned out, after I went through the process, I'm like, this wasn't half bad at all. And then by just being a good homeowner myself and just, looking at, the value of my home and, just looking at interest rates and learning more about real estate just through, general home ownership stuff, that's when I decided to make the leap and say, well, hey, I would like to, help other people like myself, achieve this home ownership because it's benefited me so much. And so I decided to go get my real estate license. And when that happened, the floodgates just opened. I really started to get into real estate. And then I started seeing things like, like cash out refis, home equity lines of credit or HELOCs, and just learning how to, becoming more comfortable and learning and leveraging property and whatnot. And this allowed me to do things like, I never thought that would ever be possible for someone like myself, flipping homes. I flipped homes, buying rental properties. I own rental properties, which is just crazy for me to say. Like, no one in my direct family had ever even owned a home. And I didn't, I knew I always wanted to own one, but I never thought I could, I never knew I could own a home. And then I'm talking like I own multiple homes now. And none of this would have been possible, I don't think, if I would have never bought my home in the first place. I don't know if I would have ever got into real estate if I hadn't purchased my home. I'm just seeing all the possibilities that are out there. I mean, and that's just scratching the surface. I mean, there's so many other things that you can do when it comes to, real estate and buying a home that just puts you in a whole nother, I guess, like echelon, and just opens you up to so many more possibilities and things that you can do that you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't own it and if you didn't buy a house. And it just changed my life so much from buying my house. And speaking of buying a house, if you're interested in, good areas to buy your house that I think enough people aren't talking about, I actually did another video right here.